welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling something super important for all the Cane Corso lovers out there.
Toxic plants?
Toxic plants, exactly. We asked you guys to send us a list of plants that you're curious about.
And you delivered.
Oh, you did. You sent in a list of 20 outdoor plants that could be dangerous for Cane Corsos.
So we're going to break it all down
We're going to break it down into bite-sized pieces.
to make sure you have the info you need to keep your pup safe.
All right, so let's jump right in. I think as Cane Corso owners, we kind of know to avoid the obvious stuff, right?
Yes.
Like certain berries and mushrooms, but
Mhm.
this list had some surprises. Peonies.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, who knew?
Yeah, peonies,
Those pretty blooms.
they're pretty, but they can cause some trouble.
For pups.
Yeah, they've got these toxins that can upset their stomachs.
Really?
And, Cane Corsos, they're big dogs. Sometimes they eat more than they
They
should.
have adventurous appetites.
Yeah, exactly. So even a plant that might not seem super dangerous can cause problems if they eat enough of it.
So it's not just about avoiding certain plants altogether, but also how much of it they get into.
Exactly. It's all about being mindful.
Okay, so peonies are on the watch list. Now, what about some of the more common culprits? Plants that maybe a lot of people already know to be cautious about.
Okay, well, let's talk about irises.
Irises, yeah. I've got a few in my garden, actually.
Oh, do you? Okay, well, you probably know to be careful with the bulbs.
Right.
But did you know that all parts of the iris are toxic,
Really?
especially for dogs?
Huh. Maybe I need to relocate those.
Yeah, it's better to be safe than sorry.
That's a good point. Okay, so irises are on the list. What else?
How about buttercups? Those cheerful yellow flowers?
Yeah, they're everywhere.
They are common, but they contain this toxin called ranunculin.
Ranunculin.
Yeah, it can cause some pretty nasty reactions,
Like what?
like blistering in the mouth, digestive upset.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah, not fun. Okay, what about clematis? I love those flowering vines, but I have a feeling they're a no-go too.
You'd be right.
Figures beautiful, but they can cause intense burning in the mouth.
Ouch.
And you guessed it, more digestive problems.
So irises, buttercups, clematis are all on the watch list. What about lantana? I've heard those berries are a big no-no.
Oh yeah, lantana berries, those are a big one.
How come?
Well, they're super tempting to dogs.
Those bright colors.
Exactly. But they've got toxins that can actually lead to liver failure.
Wow, that's serious.
It is. If you have lantana in your yard, you got to be extra vigilant.
Okay, noted liver failure is definitely something we want to avoid. Speaking of serious, what about boxwood? I feel like those shrubs are in every landscaping project.
They are, and unfortunately, they're another common culprit when it comes to plant toxicity in dogs.
What makes them so dangerous?
Well, they contain alkaloids.
Alkaloids.
Yeah, and while a little nibble might not cause too much trouble, if they ingest a large amount, it can lead to vomiting, diarrhea, even problems breathing.
Wow. It's crazy how something that looks so harmless can actually be so dangerous.
It is, and that's why it's so important to be aware.
Right, because our dogs don't know any better.
Exactly. The ASPCA says that plant toxicity is a really common issue for pets.
It makes you think about all the hidden dangers lurking right in our backyards.
It's true. We have to be their protectors.
All right, so we've talked about some of the more common culprits. Now, what about some of the less common or less obviously dangerous plants on this list? What really surprised you?
Well, like you mentioned earlier, the peonies being on there, that's one that throws some people off.
Yeah, for sure.
Another one that often raises eyebrows is yarrow.
Yarrow. Really? Isn't that supposed to be like a medicinal herb?
It is. It's been used in traditional medicine for ages, but for dogs, it can cause some issues.
Like what?
Increased urination, vomiting, diarrhea, even skin irritation.
Wow.
It all depends on how much they ingest, of course.
Hmm.
But it's important to be aware of the potential risks.
So even if a plant is good for humans, doesn't mean it's good for our furry friends.
Not necessarily.
Okay, what's another example of a plant that might surprise people with its toxicity?
How about wisteria?
Wisteria, those gorgeous cascading flowers.
The very same. Beautiful, fragrant, but the seeds and pods are particularly toxic to dogs.
Oh no.
Yeah, they can cause severe gastrointestinal distress, and in some cases, even lead to more serious complications.
I'm starting to get a little paranoid here. It feels like everything's out to get my poor Cane Corso.
Don't panic.
Mm.
Knowledge is power. That's what we're doing here, right? Understanding the risks and taking steps to keep our pups safe.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better. So we've covered some of the common culprits, a few surprises. What about plants that are particularly dangerous because of how severe the reaction can be?
Okay, yeah, let's talk about those.
What should we be extra cautious about?
Well, one that comes to mind right away is monkshood.
Monkshood.
Yeah, got these deep purple-hooded flowers. Really pretty, but incredibly toxic.
How toxic are we talking?
Even a small amount can cause a whole host of problems, from gastrointestinal upset to heart rhythm problems.
Oh,
And in severe cases, it can even be fatal.
that's terrifying. I'll definitely be keeping an eye out for that one, making sure my dog steers clear. Are there any other plants with particularly dangerous consequences?
Absolutely. Elderberry is another one to be very wary of.
Elderberry. But don't people make jam and stuff from those?
They do. The ripe berries are used for all sorts of things, but the leaves, the stems, and the unripe berries,
Oh.
they contain cyanide-producing glycosides.
Wait, cyanide?
Yes. And these glycosides are incredibly toxic. They can have devastating effects on a dog's health.
Okay, that one's going on the absolutely avoid list. So what kind of symptoms should owners be watching out for if they think their dog might have gotten into something toxic?
Well, it can vary depending on the plant and how much they ate, but some common signs of poisoning include vomiting, diarrhea, loss of appetite, lethargy, tremors, seizures, and difficulty breathing.
So if you see any of those signs, especially if you know your dog has been around a potentially toxic plant.
Get to the vet immediately.
Exactly. And listeners, remember, we're not vets ourselves. So if you have any concerns about your dog's health, always consult with a professional.
They're the experts when it comes to keeping our furry friends healthy.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the major players on the toxic plant list, both common and less common. But before we move on to part 2 of our deep dive, I want to touch on something that's really struck me. A lot of these plants are actually quite attractive. Lantana with its colorful berries, wisteria with its gorgeous blossoms, they're almost designed to tempt a curious dog.
You've hit on a really important point. It's often the most appealing plants, the ones with bright colors, enticing scents, or interesting textures that pose the greatest risk.
Why is that?
Dogs explore the world with their mouths, and those appealing features can be irresistible.
It's like nature's playing a cruel trick on us.
In a way, but it just highlights the importance of understanding those risks and finding ways to create a safe and stimulating environment for our dogs.
So how do we do that? How do we balance beauty with safety?
That's a great question, and one we'll be tackling in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned, folks. We'll be back with more insights and tips on keeping your Cane Corso safe from toxic plants. Welcome back to our deep dive on toxic plants for Cane Corsos. I gotta say, this is pretty fascinating stuff.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah,
Kind of makes you look at your backyard a little differently.
definitely. But like you said before, knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
The more we know, the better we can protect our furry friends.
Exactly. So where should we go from here? We've talked about a bunch of plants already.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground, but I'm sure there's more to uncover.
Oh, there's always more to learn, especially when we're talking about plants and, their effects on our dogs.
Okay, so where do we dive in next?
Well, in this next part, let's get into the specifics a bit more.
Okay.
Like how these toxins actually affect a dog's body.
Ooh, this is where it gets interesting. I'm ready to go beyond just the names and symptoms.
All right, let's do it. Let's start with alkaloids. We've mentioned them a few times already. So alkaloids are these naturally occurring compounds. They contain nitrogen,
Okay.
and they're found in a ton of plants.
And some of them can be toxic to dogs.
Exactly. Some are totally fine, but some can cause some real problems.
Can you give us an example of an alkaloid that we might already know?
Sure. Think about caffeine.
Caffeine, okay.
It's an alkaloid. It stimulates your nervous system.
Right, it wakes you up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now imagine that same stimulating effect, but on a dog's body
Hmm.
and amplified, potentially harmful.
Oh, okay, so it's like overloading their system.
Yeah, kind of. They can interfere with nerve transmission,
Mm-hmm.
mess with heart rhythms, even cause tremors or seizures.
Yikes. All right, so alkaloids are a big one. What about glycosides? I remember you mentioned those before with elderberry.
The glycosides, yep. Those are another group of compounds we find in plants.
And they're bad news for dogs.
They can be. They're a bit more complicated than alkaloids, but basically they often mess with the normal function of cells.
How so?
Think of it like this. A glycoside is like a key that fits into the wrong lock in the body. It disrupts the processes that are supposed to happen smoothly.
So it's like throwing a wrench in the works.
Exactly. And the symptoms can be all over the place depending on the specific glycoside and how much the dog ate.
But we're talking vomiting diarrhea.
Right. Those are common.
Mhm.
And then potentially more serious problems like heart irregularities or even kidney failure.
Wow. It's incredible how these plants can have such a powerful impact on our dogs.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it just shows how important it is to know what's growing around us and what those plants can do.
Okay, so we've got alkaloids and glycosides. Are there any other major toxin groups we should be aware of?
There are a ton of different types of plant toxins, but those two are definitely some of the most common when it comes to dogs.
So if we can remember those two, we're off to a good start.
Definitely. And understanding those categories can help you make better decisions about what to avoid.
Okay, so we've talked about the toxins.
Mhm.
Now let's talk about prevention.
Okay.
What are some things we can do to minimize the risk of our dogs encountering these toxic plants?
Prevention is key, right? First things first, you got to know your plants.
So do your research.
Exactly. Learn what's growing in your yard and your neighborhood. There are great resources online, like the ASPCA website. They have really comprehensive lists of toxic plants.
I love the ASPCA website. It's such a great resource.
It is. And if you're ever unsure about a plant, just play it safe. Keep your dog away from it.
Better safe than sorry.
Always. And speaking of keeping your dog away from things, always use a leash when you're out and about.
Good point. It's easy to get distracted when you're at the park or on a walk.
It is. But that leash gives you control over where your dog goes and what they might try to munch on.
It's all about being vigilant.
Right. And another thing you can do is make sure your dog has plenty of safe toys and activities to keep them busy.
A tired dog is a well-behaved dog.
Exactly. If they're mentally and physically stimulated, they're less likely to go exploring plants they shouldn't be chewing on.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've got knowledge leashes and keeping our pups entertained. What else?
What about dog-friendly landscaping?
Oh, yeah, I was thinking about that earlier. You know, we were talking about how a lot of these toxic plants are actually really pretty.
Right.
Does that mean we have to sacrifice beauty for safety?
Not at all. There are tons of beautiful plants out there that are perfectly safe for dogs.
Okay, good. I'm not ready to live in a concrete jungle just to keep my dog safe.
I hear ya. It just takes a little research and planning.
So where do we start? What are some of your favorite dog-friendly plants?
Ooh, that's a fun one. Well, for starters, sunflowers are always a winner.
Sunflowers, I love those.
They're cheerful, they're vibrant, and totally non-toxic to dogs.
Perfect. What about something that's maybe a little more low maintenance?
How about ferns?
Ferns, okay.
They're hardy, easy to care for, and totally dog safe. And if you want some color, zinnias and snapdragons are great choices.
Those are all beautiful options. It's good to know that we can have a nice looking yard without putting our dogs at risk.
Exactly. And remember, if you're ever unsure about a plant, just check with the ASPCA website or your vet. They can give you the info you need.
Perfect. So we've got prevention, dog-friendly alternatives, and the importance of consulting with experts. What else should we be thinking about when it comes to keeping our Cane Corsos safe from toxic plants?
Well, there are a few more specific plants I'd like to highlight. Some that might be especially tempting to dogs because of their looks.
Okay, let's hear it. We're back for the final part of our deep dive into toxic plants for Cane Corsos. It's been a lot of information.
It has, but hopefully in a good way.
Definitely. We've gone from those common culprits to some real surprises, and even dug into the science of it all.
The science is fascinating, isn't it?
It is, but I think the biggest takeaway for me is just how important knowledge and prevention are.
Couldn't agree more.
We've got to be responsible dog owners, and that means being aware of the risks.
Exactly. So before we wrap things up, I want to touch on a few more plants.
Okay.
Some that might be especially tempting to dogs because of how they look.
Right, like we were saying before, it's almost like nature's playing a trick on us. The prettiest plants are often the most dangerous.
It's true. So let's start with hellebore.
Hellebore.
It's also called Lenten rose. It's got these really delicate rose-like blooms.
Sounds pretty.
It is. But all parts of the hellebore plant are toxic to dogs.
Oh, so even though they're beautiful, we gotta admire them from afar.
Exactly. Better safe than sorry.
What else should we add to our watch list?
Larkspur.
Larkspur.
Yeah, it's one of those plants that you see everywhere. Gardens, fields, even growing wild.
I think I know what you're talking about. It's got those tall flowers with the blue or purple blossoms, right?
Yep, that's the one. But it contains these toxic alkaloids.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and those alkaloids can really mess with their nervous system and muscles.
What kind of problems can they cause?
Weakness, paralysis, even respiratory failure.
So even plants that grow naturally can be dangerous.
Absolutely. And here's one that might surprise you. Morning glory.
Morning glory. You mean those pretty trumpet-shaped flowers?
Those are the ones. But here's the thing. The seeds of the morning glory plant contain compounds that are similar to LSD.
Wait, are you serious?
Totally serious.
Mm.
Ingesting those seeds can cause hallucinations in dogs.
Hallucinations. Wow.
Yeah, disorientation too. And, of course, gastrointestinal upset.
That's wild. I never would have guessed that something like morning glory could be so dangerous.
It's a good reminder that you can never be too careful when it comes to protecting your dog from potential toxins.
Okay, so we've got hellebore, larkspur, morning glory. What else is there?
How about nightshade?
Nightshade. That sounds ominous.
It is, and for good reason. All parts of the nightshade plant are toxic.
Really?
Yeah, and ingesting them can cause some pretty severe symptoms. Digestive issues, neurological problems, even death in some cases.
Yikes. Definitely one to avoid.
Definitely. And the last one I want to mention is pokeweed.
Pokeweed.
It's got these big, showy leaves and clusters of dark berries.
Those berries probably look pretty tempting to a dog.
They do, but they're super toxic.
Uh-oh. What happens if they eat them?
Digestive upset, breathing problems, even seizures. It's
Right.
really
Yeah.
important to keep your dog away from pokeweed.
Noted. Well, this has been quite the deep dive. We've learned so much about the potential dangers hiding in our gardens, parks, even just out in nature.
It's been a journey for sure.
But it's been a valuable one, I think.
I hope so. The goal is to empower you with the knowledge you need to keep your Cane Corso safe.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power. And by taking the right precautions, we can make sure our furry friends live long, healthy, happy lives.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Mhm.
And remember, if you ever have any doubts about a plant, always, always consult with your vet.
They're the experts.
They are.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
We hope you learned a lot and that you'll use this information to keep your Cane Corso happy and healthy.
And safe.
Until next time, happy gardening and happy dog walking, everyone.